look, Emmanuel, again, thanks for joining us. How did you get started and get into the, at least not into the sports of mixed martial arts itself, but you know, being a fan and interviewing the fighters, running podcasts, and just creating content and material on the sport, on the upcoming events, and also the past events, as well as the athletes themselves?
Right. So, me personally, MMA started back in 2010 when I started training MMA. And by doing that, I was obviously introduced to UFC because I'm one of those few people that I started training first and then watching after. Most people normally watch UFC first and then they start training after. I was the other way around. And then the podcast itself, it came about when Reese McKee had his UFC debut, and I had no idea who he was. And the guy lives like 45 minutes away from me. And because I wasn't following any of the smaller promotions or anything like that, I was always just watching UFC, nothing else. Wouldn't even entertain Bellator or Brave, nothing like that. Just a UFC diehard fan, really. So once I saw Reese in there, I just started thinking, okay, this is wrong. I should know that I have like athletes, in my backyard that have UFC level talents. And if I don't know, I'm going to make sure that I know from now on, that I follow their journeys until, whether it's UFC, Bellator, Brave, One Championship, whatever happens to be. But I'm going to make sure that I will know the next guy getting the UFC that's from, my backyard. So that's how the idea came about. That's why I called it the Prospect MMA, because I wanted to get the prospects from an amateur level all the way up.
Okay.
So yeah.
You weren't, when it comes to interviewing the athletes, you never felt nervous or even scared? Because before I started doing this, before we got a guest on, really it was David who who reached out to quite a few of the people that we've interviewed on the podcast so far. He's a lot braver than me. I've always been very reserved and always been very nervous that you kind of, first of all, you don't know this person and they don't know you. So the whole thing for me personally speaking, it does feel rather awkward. So I tend to feel like, no, I can never do that. It's better I just stick to just talking about the sport from on the side, from the outside.
Yeah.
If they would like to come and speak about something on the podcast, I'll be more than happy to entertain that. But when it comes to doing things the other way around, reaching out to them and asking them to come onto the show, I've been very wary and very just very nervous about doing that. I mean, but for you, that wasn't the case.
No. On the contrary. So I'll tell you this story. So I was suffering from depression and anxiety. I was in a car crash in 2014. I've put on like a lot of weight. I was 18 stones. And for those who don't know, that's 255 pounds. So that's heavyweight territory that I was in. Heavier than some of the heavyweights like Stipe Miocic and stuff like that, and I started, after like 2 years of suffering with depression, I started going through my weight loss. I lost a bunch of weight, and then I wanted to tackle the anxiety portion of it. And I came across this challenge called the 75 Hard Challenge online. And it's like 75 days of misery. But part of that program is you got to do something that you don't want to do, and you got to do it every day. And I was like, what's worse than for me to go live on Instagram with someone that I don't know, talk about MMA? Okay, that's a subject that I can talk with anyone for hours, whether I know them or I don't, right? So I had that topic in mind. And the why was to get to know the next fighters that will be going on to the UFC and so on. But the going live on Instagram was really important for me to get out of my comfort zone, so that, like doing on Zoom, you can edit, you can cut, you can make mistakes and kind of, brush them off. But when you're live, you're live. There's no second takes. That's it. So I did that on purpose just to get me out of my comfort zone, help with my anxiety, um, allow me to connect with people and talk to people again. And I can say it worked. Like there's no other there's no other thing to say. Like it worked. I can now talk with anyone, anytime, anywhere. No nerves really. I used to get like super nervous before, like
Mm.
shitting bricks. Yeah, but poker face, go live, and that's it. And then like one of the things you have with the live is that you have a bunch of people on the comments asking questions and then commentating and all that stuff. So it kind of makes it a bit worse at the beginning, but now I kind of like it, enjoy that, and like that portion of it. So it makes it more interactive between my followers and their followers, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're not alone. It is hard at the beginning, but if you keep at it, like I'm now a year later, and I'm nearly 300 episodes in. So like that's a lot of hours, doing the same thing over and over again. So yeah, it will become second nature.
Fingers crossed. I hope so. But I mean, what got you into the sport? I mean, of mixed martial arts. Have you always been a fan of not just mixed martial arts, but of combat sports in general?
No, never. That's another funny story. Um, I was raised as a Jehovah's Witness. So like my mom would be the one person saying, you can't watch movies that have violence on TV. You can't have any toys that resemble any violence whatsoever. So yeah, like I couldn't watch like Dragon Ball or anything like that. So I was like always very like sheltered growing up. And so I never followed like anything like that. And then when I moved over here, so I'm from Portugal for reference. Whenever I moved to Northern Ireland, again, I was like overweight, and I had gone through a breakup with my girlfriend at the time, and I was like, I'm going to get in shape, and I'm gonna win her back, So I knew this friend of mine that was doing MMA, and the guy was like ripped, like shredded, like like proper fit. And I was like, yeah, I'm gonna try and do that. And I literally joined on a Monday, and I just kept showing up. And Dave saw me in person, but if he could picture me as a featherweight, I went from 15 stones at a time down to a featherweight, which is like 10 stone or something. So that was my first weight loss journey that I went through, and it was literally random. If I didn't know that guy at that time that was doing MMA, I would have never probably stumbled upon it. But knowing him, obviously admiring his work ethic and how he looked, got me into it. Starting it for me was like, this is amazing because of the chess match that happens between people, and me growing up, I was always like a huge nerd. I've like played in tournaments all over Portugal of chess and Magic the Gathering, and then for those who know the game, it's like highly complicated, and there's a lot of strategy behind it and stuff like that. So I always enjoyed that. And yeah, MMA was that times 100, because there's actual physical consequences to your mistakes. It's not just I win and you lose, something is going to go wrong, so that drew me in straight away. I done MMA for a year, and then I had to stop because I got my shoulder torn in a Kimura submission that I didn't tap. Anybody watching this, just tap and live to fight another day. Leave your ego outside the gym. Yeah.
No.
But yeah, my arm got torn. So then I left MMA altogether, just kept watching the UFC. So it was one of them things, I can't do it, but I'll still stay up to date. And this was around the John Jones rise, John Jones, Anderson Silva, JSP. So that's like when MMA really started taking over and really rising, I think. So that's around the time that I started like really paying attention to it. And again, because I started with the UFC, I never had a reason to look at, Cage Warriors or Bellator or anything like that. I was like, this is the best. Like people even tried to get me to watch boxing, but like I looked at boxing and I was like, this is some dumb shit. I could kick that guy or take him down. Like what the fuck, and vice versa. People tried to get me to look at BJJ. And I'm like, this is also bullshit. I could elbow this guy or I could punch him or, that kind of stuff. So once you learn MMA and you appreciate MMA, everything else just seems incomplete and dumb by comparison to it. And I was under the impression by watching UFC, everything else is also going to be, on a lower standard by comparison with the UFC. But I was mistaken. So yeah. The UFC level in Ireland, I can say is like proper.
It's kind of like for myself, it's like similar to you. Mixed martial arts. What really got me, let me say, let's say as a novice fan, but what really sparks or starts my interest of the sport is that I just had just one kickboxing session with a coach last year at the start of the pandemic in the UK, the COVID virus. So just that one session, I enjoyed the fact that, maybe you've had a long, really horrible day and you just need something therapeutic to just vent out all that stress on something, and all the punching, the kicking, just getting rid of that anger and through that. Let's say, okay, it's violence, but it's very therapeutic, and it's just very satisfying, very, very. And that I was thinking, wow, so there's this sport that I've been seeing, mixed martial arts, and the other time that a few years before that, when I had seen something or was interested in a particular event that was related to, I think it was when Conor McGregor was going to fight Manny Pacquiao. It was back in 2015.
No,
was it
May when he fought Mayweather?
No, yeah, that yes, that was it.
Yeah,
sorry.
Yeah.
No, that wasn't even mixed martial arts. That was boxing.
That's right.
Yeah, that was boxing. I remember there was an event that involved Conor McGregor, and it was a huge event, both in the US, here in the UK, Ireland, everywhere. And okay, that interested me then. Then I lost interest, but then I actually last year did a boxing, not boxing, but kickboxing session lesson with a kickboxing coach. I enjoyed it a lot. It was very therapeutic. I mean, that just started my interest, and more or less everything just started snowballing from there. So though I do understand that the sport is still frowned upon by quite a few people because of the health implications, injuries to the head and other areas, but the head in particular.
Boxing or MMA?
Well, you could say both, but I think
because there's a really good argument here for us to have.
Okay,
if you want to go down that route.
Oh, you set him up. Let
go on a tangent now.
Let him go.
Well, okay.
Probably
boxing is like far worse than MMA. As far as like head injuries, boxing is like far worse than MMA. You go look at the deaths from boxing versus deaths from MMA, and it's like hundreds of % higher in boxing than it is in MMA. It's like there's not even an argument, but people have that misconception. So think about this. In boxing, I knock you down, the referee doesn't stop the fight. He's going to give you 10 seconds for you to get up, and he's going to give you another chance for you to get knocked the fuck out again. Like, what the hell? In MMA, you get down, that's it, it's over. Fight's over. If you're not completely out, you can try a takedown and minimize the damage, so you can buy yourself some time, way more than 10 seconds most of the times, right? If you're being outstrike on your feet, again, you can try the takedown. So you're not forced in this situation where you have to be a punching bag for X amount of minutes, 12 rounds of 2 minutes or whatever happens to be in boxing, where it's just being constantly punched. And then that's the other problem. With boxing, it's pretty much head first, and then you have a little bit of the body as your target. Where MMA, they can go for the legs, they can go for the body and the head. So it's not just legs. And then obviously you have the percentage of people that are actually grapplers and they're not strikers, that are just going to try, take you down, submit you. That's it. Safe night for everybody. Done and dusted. Nobody takes any head damage. So you have like a huge percentage of fights that end without even, any serious head damage. Where in boxing, you always have to occur some head damage before the fight is stopped.
Absolutely. Yeah.
There's no way around it because that's the sport of boxing.
Yeah.
Anybody that wants to have that argument with me, it's like, I'm ready.
No, I agree with exactly what you're saying. The one thing is, obviously, there's not as much data on UFC or MMA now as there is in boxing because it's been a long time. But exactly what you're saying is, and especially because they've got 10-ounce gloves, because then you can keep hitting and people aren't getting knocked down, and you're constantly getting rocked in the brain with the 10-ounce gloves, as opposed to if you get hit with 4-ounce glove, chances are you're going night if they catch you correctly. Whereas in boxing, it's just a sustained, and like you said, they get a chance to get back up. Like Tyson Fury, when he got hit by Deontay Wilder, his lights were out. Like I know he came back and I know he came back and won that fight. But like you said, in MMA, if he hit the ground like that, it's over. Yeah. So I agree with what you say, because there's so many different facets to MMA. With the grappling, you can go for a takedown, but I think they're more conscious of the health as well, and stuff like that. That once they go down, the referees, I'd rather referees stop it early than stop it late. And if that,
like the Frankie Edgar situation this weekend, where he was complaining of the stoppage, but then he gets up and he's like chicken dance everywhere, like, okay, like you can't argue that. You might be arguing, but it was the correct stoppage. There's no argument there. For your safety, you're like 40 years of age, just let the fight go.
There's like a repetition of what happened with him and Sandman, Corey Sanhagen, back in February or March. Just that single flying knee and Edgar was out.
Knockout. Yeah, like he was out. That was it.
Yeah. So, David, because Emmanuel, you said that you can only hang around up until about 9:45.
Yeah.
Or can you stay for a bit longer?
Yeah, maybe another 5 or 10 minutes, maybe. After that.
David, did you want to review the UFC 268? It was a very stacked card.
Well, I was going to ask. I wanted to ask Emmanuel more about his page and what he's doing. Because we've got him on here, so just trying to get the knowledge out of him now of what he's done and how he's got to where he's got.
True.
So obviously you said you went and with people in your backyard and you wanted to know them. You've only been doing this about a year, really, haven't you? Is it a year that you've been doing the interviews?
November the 11th is going to be the first year. So that's Thursday. Thursday is going to be the 1-year anniversary of the podcast. That's when I put the image made from the Samsung Notes on my phone, where I changed the background to black and I put letters in red and I just typed Prospect MMA Podcast, took a screenshot, went on Instagram, created a page, took the name. Okay, that's sorted. Went on Twitter, did the same thing. Went on Facebook, did the same thing, and went on YouTube as well, did the same thing. So like I took Prospect MMA Podcast everywhere. Went on Anchor FM, which is where I host the podcast from, which I don't do often, to be honest, because I need like a podcast manager to help me with that. I just do too many. Like the volume is so much that I can't keep up. I tried at the beginning, but anyway. So that was the first step, the inception of the idea. And then, I took all the names, and then it was literally the UFC was on that weekend, and I looked at all the prelims, and I started checking every single fighter on all the prelims, because that's all I wanted to know. So like, let me dedicate this podcast to guys that don't have the spotlight on them, right? So prelims, check all the fighters, and then I start checking, like, some of these fighters have less followers than I have on my coaching page, and I'm like, what the fuck's going on here? Like, this is wrong. Like, some of them had like 800 followers, like 1,000 followers. And I'm like, okay. I would think being a UFC fighter, they would have like, 10,000 plus followers, but that's not the case, unfortunately. I think like if you call yourself a UFC fighter, you should be so well compensated that like that's all you do. That's your job. You have nothing else to do. But that's a topic for another conversation, I guess. But yeah, so I messaged like a bunch of them, and then I got like one reply, So I was like, okay, fuck it, I'll have this UFC fighter on. And then in the same week, Clan Wars announces the Clan Wars 38 card for December, and then they start putting their matchups up like they do now, announcing this person versus this person. So then I started messaging those people, and those started replying really quick. I was like, okay, so I'm onto something here. UFC might be too early for me to try and hit those names, because I literally had just started the page, versus the local guys. So, I message them, I'm from Northern Ireland as well, blah, 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 blah. This is what I'm looking to do. And yeah, I got a few replies, and that's literally how I started. But then because like I literally sent like everybody messages, which we're talking about 40 fighters, and most of them said yes. That's why I started, having episode on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Next week again, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, because I wasn't going to say no, right? I already had sent the messages. I wasn't expecting everybody to say yes, or most people to say yes. So then I couldn't say no. So I was like, okay, fuck it. You've sent all the messages. Now you have to get through everybody. I was thinking at the beginning, I'm just going to do like one interview a week, which is what everybody else does on their podcasts. But yeah, since everybody said yes, I was like, okay, now I got to hold up to my side of the deal, and I have to get everybody on. And yeah, it started catching on really well. Then after that, Clan Wars, we had Cage Legacy announcing for March. And then around the same time, Clan Wars announces the next card as well. So they were both going to go in March, like a week or two from each other. So again, you're talking about 40 fighters on one side, 40 fighters on another. So I had like 80 potential fighters to, ask who wants to come on the podcast. And then I got the first promotion to get in touch with me, which was Cage Steel from England. And they were like, oh, we love what you're doing, this and that. Can you interview some of our fighters? I was like, yeah, of course. So then I started doing that for them. Then Cage Legacy got canceled because of COVID. Clan Wars got canceled because of COVID. So then things got like postponed until June or July earlier this year. So again, another card gets released because most of the fights had to be scrapped. But yeah, so then, like every time there's like an event going on, you have like a huge pool of fighters to ask as far as guests goes. Sorry. So yeah, so is that what you were asking? Yeah. How did was it?
How did you get started? Can I just ask, when you asked your first set of guests, obviously the 40 fighters, whatever, how many followers did you have at that stage?
Less than 100. Literally. Like Alexander O'Sullivan was the first guy to say yes. And he is literally like one of the best amateurs in Ireland. The guy had like 29 fights at the time. He was 19-10, and he was going to have his last amateur fight, his 30th fight. He was the first guy to say yes. He had over 1,000 followers. So he was like a guy that didn't care how many followers I had. If I wanted to talk to him, he was like, yep, I'm game to have a conversation. And that's what I found across the board. Most guys are like down to have a conversation and say yes. Yeah, if you're interested in them, they will give you the time. Especially these guys at this level, amateur level. Yeah, and and that's something that I definitely enjoyed. For one, it's less pressure having an amateur guy than a UFC athlete. Let me tell you that. Because the UFC athlete, I feel like you need to have, all your questions written, all your research done, and all this and that. Where I also found out as I've been doing this more and more, I want to be like Joe Rogan in the sense of I want to have a conversation. I don't want to have an interview. I don't want to have questions written. I have a few topics that I know I'm going to hit, but I'm just going to let the conversation flow from the beginning to the end. And yeah, I think that's something that people enjoy when they watch my interviews. Yeah, because like everything is unscripted. There's like not a single thing that I script or research or questions that I write down, anything like that. It's too much for me. So I have too many fighters on to be doing that. Literally, yeah.
All right. No, that's great. One thing that actually prompted a question in my mind was the UFC fighters when they do ask you, or when you ask them to the high ranking guys, and the names are established in the UFC and more or less in the sport of mixed martial arts. When you reach out to them to ask them for like, an interview to come into your podcast and so on, do they actually go and check your numbers, how many views you have, how many followers you have?
Never once have I got anybody asking me that question. Never once.
Okay.
But again, I don't really hit the top guys. I hit the guys in like the prelims and stuff like that.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
No,
yeah.
I get what you're saying. I got that once when I reached out to a particular person, but they weren't, well, at the time they were connected to someone who was a UFC fighter. In fact, they're coming off the end of their career, they're retiring. You may know who this is, but they actually said, they more or less kind of said like your numbers are too small, your numbers are too low, and blah blah blah. I may not be able to help you with your numbers because I mean they would have come to the show, but I think they were using that as an excuse not to come onto my show at the time. So I thought, okay, it's a good chance he's not going to come on. So I thought it is what it is. If he comes on, fine. If he doesn't come on, okay, I can't force him to do just that. I mean, the person from what I was seeing in the media and everything else at the time, they're very, very narcissistical. So I can't say that I was surprised at the sort of feedback that I was getting after reaching out to them and asking them to come to the show. So yeah, I mean, I was just aware of that because it's something that I did consider before in the past. If my numbers are too low, then or if the ratings are too low, then potentially
like
they
the
might.
way I see it is if you don't ask, you don't get. That's the first thing. And this comes from like sales background 101. If you don't ask, you don't get. And that's what I've worked in most of my life was sales. So like reaching out and sending that DM doesn't cost you any money. It's not going to take much time either. So like you might as well ask, right? If you're ready to have them on the show, you might as well ask. But I can tell you from the nearly 300 interviews that I've done, I think less than 10 are UFC fighters. So it's not like I've done a huge amount. I've done Mason Jones before he had his UFC debut. I had Reese McKee while he was in the UFC. I had Jimmy the Brick Flick, which again was before he went on the UFC. So I had him like on the week of the fight that he was going to have his UFC debut. So you can kind of see a theme here. Like whenever a fighter is like announced that he's going to go on the UFC, I like reach out. You want to come on? Prospect MMA, it's like self-explanatory. You're a prospect. You're going to the UFC. Let's get to know you and that kind of stuff. I had Miranda Fear the Maverick on. She was a really good one because she was in the prelims, I think twice. She came on. She has like, or she had 24,000 followers at the time. And then she won this fight in like fantastic fashion. And she went like in one weekend from like 24,000 to like 60,000 followers. But because I had Messenger before that happened, she still got in touch with me, and she said, yeah, we'll do the interview this day, blah, blah, blah. And we still got that one done. Like, I'm pretty sure, and some other fighters would have just, oh, I'm now too big or something, I now have 60,000 followers. I don't need to be giving attention to this guy that has like 1,500 followers or whatever I had at the time, But yeah, she kept her word, and she came on the podcast, and I really appreciate that. Yeah, I had Nathan, the Mayhem, something like that, whatever his last name is, can't remember. So yeah, like I haven't had like that many UFC fighters, and you're probably not going to know most of the names if I had to guess. So it's like, smaller kind of guys. And that's what I want to help them with at the same time. I want my podcast in 10 years' time to be the podcast that people come on to get to know the fighters before they go on to the UFC, or if they join the UFC, they want to come on my podcast to introduce themselves to the world. And I want like UFC to look at my podcast and be like, oh, he's having this guy that doesn't fight for us. Why is he having him on? Let's get in touch with this guy and let's give him a UFC contract. That kind of stuff.
Sure thing. I think we might have to wrap up here and probably reconnect again, because David's the Zoom is telling me that you only get about 60 minutes to record, unless if you upgrade to Pro, and then you get more time.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Well, things work out. It's 9:45 anyway, so yeah, that works out. But yeah, we can do a part 2 whenever. I'm down for it.
David, what do you think?
Yeah, I do part 2, no problem. Like, there's still more questions I'd like to ask. Obviously, if we need to go, we need to go. But like, there's so many things. Me and Emmanuel know each other outside of this as well. But there's so many things I wouldn't have asked him, kind of, that I can get to ask him now. Not that I wouldn't ask you. I just think it's more of a suitable setting now, and it's more interesting to talk about. So I would love to have Emmanuel on again for a part 2.
Yeah.
Personally, yeah.
Thank you. Appreciate
Thank
that.
you for joining us.
Yeah. Shout out to our muscle.
he's always promoting his sponsors. Look, that's actually
good.
another question I'll ask you on part 2. That's what I'm going to ask you on part 2. I won't ask you any money figures, just how you got your sponsors.
Yeah,
but,
that's I'll let you know on that one as well. Good stuff. Perfect. Are you guys then gonna put the 2 episodes together and then publish as one, or will you literally publish part 1 and then?
I think, yeah, that's probably what I have to do. But I'll see, once I end this call, I'm going to see what the software does, because usually what Zoom will do is that after ending the call, it will start to convert the previous video I'm chatting to an MP4 file, which takes about, depending how long it is, takes about 10 to 15 minutes.
Okay.
Unfortunately, that's how fast my computer is. I'm afraid. So
at least you have one.
Yeah.
My kids jumped on both of my laptops, so like I have nothing. So it's like, yeah, at least you got one.
Yeah, right. I need to get a laptop as well. It'll make it easier for editing and stuff.
Yeah, I have my phone. That's it.
Yeah, I need to look into more software and stuff. So thank you for coming on, and we will arrange time for part 2. What?
Yeah, no worries. Let me just tell you this. Do you remember the blue phone that I was using at Cage Legacy?
Yeah.
It's been broken beyond repair. Lost all the footage from that. All of it. And that's the phone that I recorded most of my stuff. So yeah.
I had a similar issue as well. I was trying to convert them across from my Google Cloud so it would come onto the phone that I use, so it could go straight to Instagram. And whatever happened in the process, I left it out, and I don't know if a child got at it or something, but all my footage from the second phone is gone, not the first phone. So,
well, you got the viral knockout, so well done on that one.
Yeah.
But that was another phone, David.
More at the IUR Fighting Championship.
Yeah, I'll have the second phone for that. Thank you.
Right. Thank you very much, guys. Have a good night, okay?
Take care, Emmanuel. Thank you.